Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today we're pleased to present Lean Startup and the Modernization of Dun & Bradstreet. I'm Jeanette DePatty from the Lean Startup Conference happening November 16th through 19th in San Francisco. Visit leanstartup.co for more information. Our speakers today are Rishi Davi and Kirsten Cluthy, who will be moderating questions from the audience. Rishi is Chief Marketing Officer at Dun & Bradstreet. Rishi joined Dun & Bradstreet in February 2014 from Dell, where he was the Executive Director of Digital Marketing. In that role, Rishi had global responsibility for implementing marketing, lead generation, media, and content strategies for Dell.com, social media, communities, and mobile. He also managed the digital support of Dell's events. Prior, Rishi led Dell's global web analytics strategy and worked on Dell's CEO-level strategy as part of Dell's corporate strategy group. Rishi has spent his career in the technology industry with marketing, business development, and consulting roles at Rivio, Trilogy Software, eBay, and Bain & Company. Rishi holds degrees in chemical engineering and economics with honors from Stanford University and an MBA in marketing from the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. Kirsten Cluthy is the editorial director for the Lean Startup Conference. Now here's a few housekeeping notes. We'll take questions from the audience via the live chat. If you'd like to ask a question, please just flag it with a Q and a colon. The speakers will answer questions in the second half of the webcast, so there's no need to ask your questions twice. And the recording will be available a few days after this live webcast. Take it away, Kirsten.
Thanks, Jeanette. Rishi, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to talking to you about the work that you're doing at Dun & Bradstreet, and of course getting a preview of the talk that you'll be doing at the Lean Startup Conference this year. So thanks for joining us. Thank you very much. So let's start with some context. I would love to get a little bit about your background. Tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing at Dun & Bradstreet from the beginning. When did you start, and what were some of the challenges that you had to address when you got there?
Definitely. Dun & Bradstreet as a company, in October of 2013, there was a new CEO that was put in place. And his real focus was, how do we really modernize Dun & Bradstreet and drive growth for the company? We are in the data and analytics space, a space which is growing tremendously, as many of you know. And so the board and our new CEO felt that there was an incredible opportunity to take advantage of this growth. But we need to modernize as a company. His first two hires were a new chief marketing officer, myself, and a chief people officer. Both focused because he felt like to drive top-line growth in kind of a modern way, it had to be led by marketing-driven growth and culture transformation as a basis to do that. And so what I was very focused on was, how do I actually achieve that? How do I modernize Dun & Bradstreet, and how do I drive that top-level growth for the company? And I did that hand in hand with our chief people officer, because we both viewed culture, strategy, and the transformation and growth to be inextricably linked to modernizing the company and moving it forward. And so I had a large challenge ahead of me to do that, which is what led me to the Lean Startup methodology, to be able to achieve that transformation very quickly.
So when you started thinking about the Lean Startup methodology, did you get to Eric's book, and it sort of struck you as a way to start to change things?
It did. I had read a lot about Lean, and I had used various aspects of it in previous roles, like when I was at Dell. And although I wasn't thinking about it in terms of a startup, because Dun & Bradstreet is a 175-year-old company and a public company, I felt like the principles were very applicable to what I was trying to do and the speed at which I was trying to do them. And so that's what led me to think about, how does that methodology work in a larger company to achieve change very quickly, both from what we need to do to change the company to change the culture as well.
So how did you apply some of the Lean Startup principles to solve some of the business challenges that you were facing?
So I really looked at it as, as many of us know, one of the big centers of the Lean Startup methodology is this concept of a MVP, like the minimal viable product. And I thought a lot about, what does that mean in the context of what I'm trying to do in marketing. So I looked at my strategy in three big areas. First and foremost, being very clear on what we did. What's our purpose? Who do we target? So being very clear on the people that we go after and how we go after them, persona-based. And then the third piece, which is where I really applied the Lean Startup methodology, is how do I take that purpose and set of values and messaging and persona-based go-to-market, and how do I implement it in a MVP type methodology to drive top-line growth? And so what I did was I said, look, there's a set of tactics that we need to employ to grow our biggest accounts. We're in the B2B space. Our minimal viable product is basically saying, okay, who are our top accounts that will allow us to achieve top-line growth? Let's start with just one or two and start to apply modern tactics to those accounts, demonstrate success, and then expand very quickly. And so that's at a high level how I try to achieve the methodology.
Can you walk us through your process for customer development? So when you're talking about the customers, and especially your top-line customers, how did you determine who they are and also who the prospective customers might be? And how did you go about identifying their needs?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So when you think about the difference between a big company and a small company, where we talk about Lean Startup methodology in the context of a small company, the big difference is that at a large company, you have a lot more, bureaucracy. You're bigger. You're a huge company. You have to do things at a big scale, etc. But what I found was that today it's actually much easier for a big company to operate like a small company. So what I did specifically was I said, okay, let's use analytics and data to really hone in on where our biggest opportunities are. And so I actually leveraged technology and analytics to really prioritize where that first customer would be, or where that my version of minimally viable product that would be. So I said, okay, let's look at the analytics. Let's look at our entire customer base and who's growing and who's not, where there's opportunity, where we've grown in the past, and saying which companies look like those companies, etc. And we came up with a list of companies in order that we felt like the biggest opportunities were. Now, given that, I could pick out, okay, my minimally viable product, my first 1, 2, 4 accounts would be these. And those are the ones that I can start to really demonstrate a new modern way to implement the new initiatives that I want to implement. So by picking those right initial accounts, which again, the right minimally viable, right set of functions and features that you would do in a minimally viable product in a startup, that I think was a big determinant of how we were able to successfully cause this change.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So you sort of identified the customers, and then you took the data, which wasn't the same, obviously, from customer to customer, and
right.
then you figured out what you were going to test with each different sort of segment of customer.
Exactly, and to your point, I started small. So we started with a handful of critical accounts where our analytics modeling said that there was the biggest opportunity for us to make a change. And so we said, okay, that's our minimally viable product from a B2B marketing standpoint. Let's succeed there and scale later.
Can you talk a little bit, maybe not specifically, but sort of give us an example of the type of experiments or MVPs that you tested with the different segments, or maybe between 1 and 2, to sort of give us an idea of the differences between the types of MVPs that you created based on the data?
Yes, so what we did was we established a whole set of tactics that we believed would be successful in an account generically, wherever they are and what the opportunity is. So for example, early stage, it may be creating great content for that customer. Later stages, it may be an in-person workshop or having one-on-one conversations at an event. Later stages, it may be actually doing a demo, ROI analysis, etc. Or later, it might be mapping out the solution, all those kind of things. And so, we had those set of tactics. Now, again, if I wasn't applying the lean startup methodology, I would say I need to have all those in place. I need to invest in all that. I need to build all that. I need to go after hundreds of accounts at once. Instead, what I did was I said, look, the analytics show that these 5 accounts have the biggest opportunity right now. Where exactly are we with those accounts? What stages are we in? And then let's develop those tactics, just those tactics that'll help those accounts move forward. And so for some of them, we were more early stage. So we said, okay, and we knew what the opportunities, let's create the content for them. Some of them were later stage. And so we said, okay, we will create a custom workshop in person with that account for that account. Again, we weren't creating a workshop for hundreds of accounts, and we weren't creating it for every single thing we sold. We were doing it specifically for that account, a custom workshop, and demonstrating success in the way we were doing it.
And so one of the things you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation was that you were working sort of along with the chief people officer. So were they involved? Was that department sort of involved as you were developing this, or is that something that came later? And what was that experience like?
Yeah. So the chief people officer was involved from day one. Now, where he was most involved was when we were thinking about. So I described all those tactics, but underneath that is actually understanding as a company, as a culture, being very clear on what we did, why we did it, and who we went after, and why we went after them, and why we were differentiated, what we did for them. Now, in order to do that, you do need to have a culture shift. And that culture shift, again, should be driven by the customer or the customers you've prioritized. And so he and I worked together with an agency to really say, what is our purpose? What is our set of values that support that? And then how do we employ tactics, messaging against that purpose and values, et cetera, against those accounts? And we needed to, and then as we did that and showed success and changed the way we approach those accounts, we were also doing a culture shift as well. And he was involved in helping me scale out that culture shift that was needed to actually change the way we went to market.
Well, that's a really good segue into my next question, which is getting a 175-year-old company to change its culture and adopt a new idea like Lean Startup can be difficult or challenging.
Yes.
So how did you do it? I mean, I know that you sort of said it came from the top, but I assume that it wasn't a very quick and dirty way to do it.
It was not.
It took a while for it to happen. So can you talk a little bit about that, and who are the people that were sort of critical to, who are the stakeholders that were critical to making that happen?
Yes. So, I think that the culture shift was, the big one was me partnering with the chief people officer from day one and saying to ourselves, let's be real, in a modern world, what we do in marketing is inextricably linked to what we do with our culture and values. It's very difficult to separate those two because you need one to succeed in the other, especially when you're trying to apply something like Lean and do something very quickly. So that partnership was very critical. Now, given that we were as partners, we worked very closely with our peers and our CEO to really drive the importance of this change, and we had them involved in kind of the purpose and values. Because, again, I think this culture shift happened because we thought a lot, first and foremost, about purpose, values, who we go after, messaging. Now, once we had that established, the culture shift happened because we started implementing what I described earlier, new tactics around accounts, new ways of doing things on a smaller scale, and we made a big deal. And this is where a partnership with the chief people officer, as well as communications, et cetera, everything is so critical, and really using those successes to talk to the company overall about why this new way of working works, why demonstrating the changes and improvements that we've done with those accounts, demonstrating moving the needle, all those kind of things allowed us to prove out that what we were saying that we need to do with the culture actually helps customers and gets them motivated and excited. So let me give you one tactical example of that. One thing we did was we, as we were scaling out this program, I challenged the team to say, okay, internal communications of these successes of our MVPs is so important. I challenged my own team to say, why don't we need to publish 100 new customer stories around this new way we interact with customers and new things we sell in 100 days. I called it Project Benjamin because the $100 bill is has Benjamin Franklin on it, and again, we even applied Lean to that, and we were able to get those 100 case studies out, and we were able to publish them broadly within our company as well as outside our company. Again, that demonstrates why this process, this new way of doing things, helps customers more broadly. It creates that culture shift. It creates that groundswell of support, and it also creates that momentum for people to coalesce around what you're doing.
That's a great example, actually, is to share the sort of the wins or the work that you're doing internally. So has it changed the culture? I mean, do you feel like everybody's working in a different way than they were when you started? Because of this changing the methodology and changing the process.
Definitely. We actually, I felt it for sure, and the company feels it for sure. And we see it from a quality of people who want to come to the company, the quality of talent that we attract, all those kind of things. But more importantly, back to kind of what I talked about, when we have these successes, we want to actually show it to the company, right, to cause the culture shift. So obviously everyone was seeing it, everyone was feeling it, but what was most interesting is we actually did the most basic thing, did a global survey. And the numbers that we got were far exceeded what we expected in terms of people feeling like we were moving in the right direction. What they were doing was connected with, they felt more connected with the company, they would recommend the company. All those type of metrics were far higher than they've ever been. And that was kind of the biggest proving ground for me that this was working.
So that was an internal survey that you did to sort of get feedback from your internal customers or your teams.
Yep.
So there are two questions that have come up that are sort of related to this. So I'm just going to throw them in right now.
Sure.
One question is, what were the biggest challenges in getting people on board with a culture shift? And I know that you sort of talked about that a little bit, but are there specific, I mean, were there people that were just like, no, I don't get it, like we're not going to do it, and this is not how we measure, and not how we work?
Yeah, definitely.
Without naming.
No, absolutely. So look, we have to live in the real world. Not everyone is going to shift. And we saw very quickly, again, this is the beauty of the Lean methodology. When you're testing these things out, there's a lot of things that come out of that process. So let me take this specific question. It's very clear that you see who is on board, who is going to be part of this change, and who is not. And we definitely saw that. And the people who we knew were not going to be part of the change, kind of left the company. There's other people who were on the fence, and then, as they joined, they became part of the process. And then there were people who just embraced it, no matter who they were. Now, one interesting thing about that, and this is counterintuitive, at least from my perspective, was that, we're a 175-year-old company. We have a lot of employees who've been here 15, 30 years, lots of them. We had some that have been here 40, 50 years. You would think that they would be the ones least likely to change. It's actually the opposite. A lot of the people who've been around a long time, they understand the DNA of the customer, of the company, all those kind of things, and they were so happy that the company was finally moving in the direction that they've been wanting for such a long time. And so again, as you apply these Lean methodologies, you have to kind of, when you test things, it never appears as you would expect. And so some of the people who've been here the longest have been the biggest contributors to the success.
That's a nice result, actually. It's good to hear. It's good to hear. So another question related to this is, what metrics did you use when you shared the case studies within your company? So how did you determine which were the ones that you wanted to share and which were most valuable?
Yeah, so we looked a lot at the ROI that our customers achieved from us working with them. We also looked at the both kind of the pipeline shift that we saw in the customers we worked with in this different way, as well as the customer experience shift that they had. And we kind of measured it. For the big accounts, we can actually interview them and survey them. But for the other accounts, we may survey them and find other more scalable means. But we both looked at, the stories we told were stories of companies achieving ROI. But the in terms of the tactics and the MVPs, as we called it, we looked at how we shifted the needle with them. And it's counterintuitive, but like clearly the numbers help you tell the story, but the anecdotes help as well. Because when you're looking at 1, 2, 3 accounts at first, where you're a huge company and you're looking at only like a handful of accounts, the anecdotes are as powerful as the numbers. And that's why focusing on scalability first is not always the best thing. So I'll give you an example. One of our big customers, he said to us, he said, look, this is a vastly different company than I was working with 2 years ago. And he gave examples of, and really he was just one of our MVPs, right? But again, that type of story motivates my peers, employees as much as the actual numbers themselves. So again, communication is very critical to this.
So a question about sort of setting up the lean startup methodology within and dealing with the culture. I'm just going to ask this question, but I'm going to change it a little bit. So in terms of leadership, when you decided that this was going to be something that you wanted to implement, did you have a top team of people that helped set it up and then coached everybody else? Did you train them? What was the process for actually putting it into the organizational structure?
Yes, it is critical that the leadership team is a seasoned one. So what I did was when I came in to the role, what I felt was most important was making sure that my direct reports understood what we were trying to do. And so it's absolutely critical that you have the right leadership team in place that could help make this happen. And what I did was very quickly, I made an assessment of who internally, those people who've been around a long time that I'd want to help me with it. But I also hired people from the outside who had proven success in other companies in implementing more modern ways or what I was trying to achieve from a vision perspective. And bringing them in from the outside in combination with those who have been here for a while, that I believed was kind of the recipe for success. Because on the one hand, you need the people who've been around for a while who know the, as I call it, the ghost in the machine, like know how to work the company, know how things work, know the key relationships and all that. On the other hand, you need people who have done this and proven themselves in other companies who can bring a fresh perspective. You need both. And so I brought both types of people and designed a leadership team to help me make this happen. And it's also important to sequence out the sequence of events that you're going to do and make that clear as well.
That's a really interesting. I think that's a key point that you just said, that you designed a leadership team. So you created the right one that would make this happen. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There's a question about sort of the why this started, and you talked about it in the beginning, but I just want to I want to back up a little bit out of that. So what was the sort of reason for deciding to modernize the company, to really change it? Was it strictly in terms of your positioning in the marketplace, or what was it from? And I mean, in just sort of simple, broad terms, what was the impetus?
The biggest thing was driving growth. So the company wasn't really growing before we came in, and now it is growing, so it's working. But the company wasn't growing, but the industry was growing incredibly fast. And the industry we're in is, again, big data, cloud, all the buzzwords, which all of us know every day that it's a fast-growing industry. So there was a need for us to take advantage of that because we're well positioned to drive top-line growth. So that was the big focus as a company. Secondly, we as a company, we were kind of known for what we used to do, and not what we did today and what we continue to do going forward to drive that top-level growth. And so, those are the kind of things that the board of the company really wanted to take advantage of. And so that's why they made a decision to put in a CEO who has a history of being strong at driving top-level growth at technology companies, as well as bring me in as a CMO. And look, I'm the first CMO in this company in modern history, of first CMO in the traditional sense of the word. And so, again, that was the purpose, driving marketing, culture-led growth, because they felt like those were the two things that were needed.
It's great, and it's great that they recognize that. So here's a question that's coming in. What suggestions do you have for a single UX practitioner working in-house to gather support for UX programs and effectively begin UX projects when this kind of work has not been done previously in the company? I'm not sure what size company, but it's probably a large company.
Yeah. I hope it's a large company because, at large companies, we're in a world now where we're in a digital world. We're also in a world where UX matters incredibly, and design matters. And so, I think that for a UX designer or somebody in UX, you have the ability to create a vision and make it visceral and real in a way that nobody else can do. Everyone nowadays, I don't know what company you're in, but everyone nowadays understands the web, is on the web, is comfortable with those interactions. To the extent that you're trying to create change, creating a vision and a UX and a prototype MVP of what you think the company should be doing, and then showing it to customers or your salespeople or whoever, and demonstrating success, it's such an incredible opportunity for a UX designer. So that's what I would suggest that you do, is that if you're trying to drive a vision and you have a strong ability to design UX experiences or user experiences, build a prototype and get it in front of customers, get it in front of your management team, and start to show the vision you're trying to employ.
I want to ask you a little bit about the data. So once you collect it, going back a little bit to the customer development piece and how you determined what your MVP should be, because this is a question that comes up a lot. So you, because you created a team and of people who are advocates and ready to work in a new kind of way, I can see that it may have been easier to go ahead and get that customer data and then determine what to do with it. But the critical point for a lot of people is once you get that information from the customers, which direction do you go in? How do you know, other than testing, how do you know where to start or which products are the right ones or which tests are the right ones to deploy? What were some of the metrics you used in order to choose the customers and then sort of build the MVP, if that's a reasonable question?
No, definitely. So you need to understand data and analytics to some degree, which is something that I'm passionate about given my background. What I did was, and we have a data analytics team, and I worked with them to really say, okay, how do we determine where our biggest opportunities are? And, there's many different levels that you can use to do that. If you're at the most basic level, just look at where you're succeeding and say, okay, how do I replicate that success? At a large company, you're succeeding somewhere, and you need to learn from that and then say, okay, what is it? So I call that kind of look-alike modeling. So we had companies within a certain industry that were doing really well, and then very similar companies that were not, and we said, wow, there's a great opportunity there, look-alike modeling. We also spent a lot of time looking at, where are these companies going and where are the biggest opportunities in terms of growth, in terms of demand for what we do. So we did that as well. We did a lot of, and I'm getting a little jargony, predictive analytics, right? That's essentially predictive analytics, look-alike modeling and predictive analytics to determine the right set of accounts that we go after. And then at the most basic level, we just cleaned up our data to make sure we had clean data and integrated data sets to make that happen. Now, this is easier said than done, but again, even at a most basic level, if you start there and then get more and more sophisticated, that helps. Because I think if you're at a big company and trying to apply lean, things that we have nowadays that we didn't have 10 years ago around data analytics, whether it's you're doing it yourself or using a third party or technology or all these kind of things, they help you operate like a small company and move very fast.
That's actually a great segue to the next question, which I'm gonna try to interpret a little bit. So, have you figured out a way or a platform to present an MVP or product idea to a customer? In the old days, and even now in some cases, it's one-on-one, it's customer meetings, it's focus groups, it's talking to customers, but there are also a lot of, this process has been enhanced by technology and survey platforms. So are you doing a little bit of both? Or have you found a great technology platform or way to conduct a survey without having to have focus groups and talk to customers, or are you still talking to them directly? What's your method is the question, I guess.
Yes, definitely. So we do a lot of different methodologies, but before I jump into those, I would say you have to talk to customers. So no matter how technology and all this stuff changes, like if you're going to own the change management initiative, you have to talk to customers personally, one-on-one, because that's the only way you get a visceral idea of what's going on and what's happening with your customers and what they need. And it's your customers as well as your salespeople, not the managers, but the frontline salespeople. So regardless of what you do on a sophisticated level, you have to talk to customers, and you have to talk to your salespeople who are talking to customers every day, because you have to be able to bring that in, again, when you're trying to convince the company to transform and say that your MVPs are working. So you have to do that. And I felt like I spent a lot of time with customers, and that helped me quite a bit in achieving the success. And I would even argue that the more senior you are at a company, the more you need to talk to customers, because you're going to lose touch by definition. So that's important. Now, in terms of more scalable means, focus groups, absolutely. Physical events, we like to bring a lot of our customers together and talk to them or have them talk as well. Now, absolutely, one of the benefits of being at a big company is you have a lot of existing customers, and really looking at your existing customers, what they're using, what they're doing with your products, just doing that base level understanding of what the current state of affairs really opens up your eyes into the opportunities within your company, which is the benefit of being at a larger company. So I mean, I would say all those things. I mean, honestly, we're not using any kind of sophisticated product testing platform other than talking to customers, looking at what's happening right now. Obviously, we do lots and lots of customer surveys of existing perspective and all those kind of things. We do all those means. We deliver those surveys digitally, all that kind of stuff. But really, the basics is what we're focusing on.
Has the sort of the implementation of Lean Startup and changing the way that you're building products, has that changed how you talk to your customers? I mean, do you have a different language? Is your tone different than, say, it was 5 years ago? I mean, by that I mean just not only talking to them in person, but has it changed the way that you survey them as well?
It has in respect of when you've done those MVPs and you kind of get a stronger understanding of what works and what doesn't work, and you're at the point now where you're saying, I need to go beyond 10 accounts, beyond 30 accounts, and scale much more. Those first 1, 10, 30 accounts give you a lot of information, and a lot of information to focus what you do talk to your customers about and what you do message to your customers and all those kind of things. So absolutely, it's no different than with Lean Startup. You develop a set of requirements, you launch an MVP, you learn a ton, and then you launch your next product. Same exact thing. And we started with about 30 accounts after we did the first handful, and you learn, and then you start adjusting on the fly, and then you change what you do with the next set. And then it also changes your broader messaging as well.
Sorry, another question just popped in. What are some challenges in getting teams aligned around the idea of not only experimentation, but, and I don't know if you use this word, a lot of people don't, but potential failure?
Comfort with failure.
Yeah.
You have to celebrate failures. And one example I gave, and I don't. This is something I learned. Like and here's another example. As a big company, we actually acquired in the first couple of years. We came in as a new management team. We acquired a couple of startups, and there's a lot to learn, obviously, in a large company from startups. One of the things we learned from one of the startups that we acquired was basically being overt about celebrating failures. So one example is we have a failure wall in one of the groups that we acquired, and now it's becoming more prominent and everyone talks about it, where we celebrate people failing, but who took a risk. And so it's very important. So this goes back to culture. It's very important that as a management team and as a culture, you actually make it okay for people to fail if they failed correctly, right? Meaning they took a risk and they failed. And so you have to just, part of your culture has to celebrate and not penalize people for not for failing.
And did you learn that by working with startups, or is it just something that you sort of determined as you went along, or was that sort of a technique that you learned from being around people that are you know, sort of entrepreneurs and then have that?
Both. So again, that's why I wanted to make sure the chief people officer and I were together. We both came from companies that, the chief people officer came from AOL. I came from Dell. We came from tech companies that had that as part of their DNA. And so when we were looking at our culture and our values and our purpose, the things I described earlier, we wanted it to be around, it's okay to take risks, and we wanted to demonstrate, again, us taking risks. So everything I've described around us, doing things fast and all that, I keep talking about and celebrating the fact that we did things quickly and we were okay with that, and talk about, things that didn't work, that did work. Constantly communicating is very critical. Even just today, I had a town hall, and I had a couple people stand up and talk about things that they've implemented very quickly in 2, 3, 4 months. And again, celebrating the fact that they did that, and recognize the fact that they did that, and it's okay if things didn't go quite as planned. That's all very critical.
It's fantastic to hear. So another question, as you talk to customers and learn, iterate, et cetera, how do you incorporate the idea of purchasing a company for the product or service versus building it yourself? So what's the difference between deciding to buy it or build it?
Yeah. So somebody knows about Dun & Bradstreet to ask that question. So we heard very consistently from customers. So we acquired a company called Net Prospects based in Boston. I won't go into details of kind of what they do. We at Dun & Bradstreet have a whole bunch, have 240 million business records on companies, and our customers were very clearly saying to us, we want this additional set of data, meaning individual people data as well. And it was so consistently asked for by our customers. And through this lean process, we had such a strong understanding of what new use cases our customers needed with that data that we felt like, this has to be part of our DNA. And so we acquired that company and we integrated it into what we do so that our customers could have an integrated experience in working with our data. Another example is we had, within certain smaller verticals, our customers asked for certain things. And so they weren't big enough for us to acquire, but we could partner. And in those cases, we partner. And look, if those things work out really well, then we could acquire potentially. But so that's kind of how we do it, is that if it's kind of fundamental to what our customers want to do, we'll acquire. And that's what we did with this company, Net Prospects.
Yep, that makes sense. So as we start to wrap it up, and I want to talk a little bit about the conference as well, can you just give me sort of some results? How much has it changed your company from when you started to now, in just like sort of big picture terms? Because I think that it's been pretty significant.
It has. So let's talk numbers, and then we'll talk details. Our stock has gone up since we joined. Our company has grown, which is what our main goal was. We've seen pipeline increases in accounts where we kind of implemented these account methodologies. But most importantly, the culture shift has been prominent, and our employees have been very vocal about how different the company is, and we're attracting great talent. And some talent actually are taking steps down now to join the company because they want to be part of this momentum that we have. And so all those kind of qualitative and quantitative factors all together make us feel good about the success we've been having.
And so in terms of numbers, how is it?
Well, you can look up our financial numbers and stock price and all that. So it's been doing well. Yep. So I prefer not to give exact numbers, okay, but ultimately you can just look at our overall public numbers. You can see and what people have written about us and things like that. So.
That's great. Sorry, another question just came through, though, so I'm going to squeeze this in here. How do you manage customer expectations that the MVP is a minimum feature set, or do you only show the MVP to specific beta users, not the entire customer base?
Yeah. So The MVP in this case is not a product, but it's the way we serve our accounts from a marketing standpoint. And so what we did was a little bit different. So when we prioritized those accounts, we it was actually all upside. We were providing them much better targeted experiences than they were getting historically. And so it was all upside, and we saw great success there. Now, more broadly, I will admit that for some of them, there were companies who were already had a strong relationship with us, where they were also very honest with us, which in the early years is not a bad way to go. Is as a bigger company, like I mentioned, you already have a set of customers. When you're starting out, it's kind of good to go with customers who are very honest, who will give you feedback straight, and who are very clear about what they need and the help they need as a start. To that point, your downside risk is not as much, and you get great feedback, and they feel good that they're partnering with you for their own success.
So for you, for example, it was you went with customers that already were familiar with the company. They had a history with you, and so therefore you were getting richer feedback than you may have gotten from somebody that was not as familiar.
Very early on, yes,
Yeah.
very early on. But as we expanded beyond the small handful, obviously we went beyond that.
Yep. So I just want to wrap it up because we're starting to hit our mark. And I just want to say I'm really looking forward to seeing you at the conference. And
thank you.
This is sort of a preview of what you're going to talk about there. And so I just want to ask, what we can expect, sort of a greater, deeper dive into some of the things you've talked about today.
Yeah. So I'll be more formal in a way I kind of present it. So what I want to do there is really talk through more visually the process we went through to make this happen. We started here, then we went here, and then we went here, and this is where we ended up. And show more visually how we went through that process and what we learned. So, for example, there were a number of questions on the analytical approach. I'll deep dive a little bit deeper into the analytical approach we used to focus our efforts in choosing where we apply the MVP methodology.
That's great. Can we take one more question? They keep popping up.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
And it's about MVP, so this is great. Following up to the previous question, did the MVP version replace the customer's existing experience, or was it a different option that they could choose?
In addition. Okay. So well, there's two aspects, right? Things that we knew were not working or they were not happy about, we changed or stopped. And then we added things that we felt like, or we tested things that we felt like are more best in class, more modern, all those kind of things. And so it's end of the day, it's looking at their set of interactions they have with the company and testing within those set of interactions.
That makes sense. So you kept it in context. It wasn't
Yes.
It wasn't entirely new, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, I am very excited to see you at the conference, and this is a fantastic talk and presentation, and a very, very rich sort of set of information that we're getting from you guys. And I would like to tell everybody that's watching that they should bring their questions, and I'm sure you'll get a lot, and also their thinking around their own business challenges. So I think there's a lot to learn from what you've done. So thank you for joining us today. Jeanette, I'm going to hand it back over to you. I think we're going to wrap it up.
Thanks to everyone for joining us today. This wraps up our show. Please join us again for the next webcast on October 22nd. In the meantime, visit leanstartup.co for more information on the Lean Startup Conference, November 16th through 19th in San Francisco. Thanks, and goodbye.